afternoon, everyone. My name is Cornell Cruz Jr. I am the Executive Director of the Community Investment Alliance of Florida. We are a nonprofit membership organization serving all of Florida, helping to build a just economy for all Floridians. Again, welcome to the podcast. We are blessed today to have a dear friend of mine, and full disclosure, I am the present chairman of the Nonprofit Executive Alliance of Broward. She is also one of our founding members of our organization, the Community Investment Alliance of Florida, and we're going to have today Sandra Veszi Einhorn to talk about the Nonprofit Executive Alliance of Broward, soon to be South Florida. We're going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about expansion. She has some great things going on, and those of you who already know Sandra know that Sandra is dynamite and a fireball and constantly working, probably works harder than any executive I know here in South Florida. So we look forward to talking to her. But again, welcome to the Just Economy podcast with our very, very, very special guest, Sandra Veszi Einhorn.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Cornell. I am so excited to be here.
Great. So, Sandra, the first thing I always ask is, everybody understands about being an executive director or running a nonprofit or for-profit company, but we want to know a little bit about you. So, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, well, I am a mother of two. I've got two girls. I can't even call them little girls anymore, 10 and 11.
I know the feeling.
With my husband, we live in Hollywood, where we both grew up. So we are hardcore Hollywood people. I am a first-generation American. My family is Hungarian, so I speak fluent Hungarian. And we are observant Jews. So it's a nice mix of a lot of different things that I think sometimes people are surprised to learn about me.
One thing that Sandra didn't mention, and it's something near dear to my heart, she is a 80s, 90s hip-hop aficionado.
Absolutely.
and loves it just as much as I do. And the kicker is she's training her kids and being hip-hop aficionados as well. They know a lot of facts about 80s and 90s hip-hop because of Sandra.
Mommy music appreciation is definitely big in our house.
I know it is. All right, so Sandra, let's jump into it. The Nonprofit Executive Alliance mission is to...
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I probably should have thought of it. So the Nonprofit Executive Alliance is a coalition of social impact CEOs that are coming together to improve our communities, elevate the voice of the sector, and really to just better create collaboration amongst nonprofits, but including all of the other stakeholders that we have. And that's not our new mission statement verbatim. As our chair, you know that we are currently going through the process of sort of updating our mission statement and our values and really trying to be thoughtful about who we are and what we do out in the community as we expand from just Broward County into serving Dade and Broward County.
Okay, so and let's talk about the executives and I've been a part of the organization now for going on 3 years. Wow, time flies. But why is it so important to have a nonprofit executive association such as ours?
So that's a really great question. As you know, because we've known each other for quite some time, I previously served as the executive director of a great organization called Rebuilding Together. And it was my first job in nonprofit formally, meaning I had been a volunteer and I'd served on boards, and perhaps like some other first-time EDs thought, gee, how hard can it be to run a nonprofit? And then you're in charge of running a nonprofit and you realize that things fall into a couple different buckets, right? There's the bucket of the things that you need to know to run the organization, and then there's the bucket of the things that you need to know, but you don't know yet. But then there's an entire world out there of things that you don't even know that you need to know to run a nonprofit. And so therefore you don't know. And in being thoughtful about how I could be a better leader, how I could be more effective, how I could do more good in the community, I really saw an opportunity in being able to take what was then called the Broward Chamber of Nonprofit Organizations and reimagine it as the Nonprofit Executive Alliance, and to really be a resource hub for nonprofit CEOs, for them to have a place to go where they can be supported both personally and professionally.
So, Sandra, I know what I really value as a member and as the board chair is the Nonprofit Executive Alliance, is all the ways that you bring different ideas and different needs that we, as you say, we may not know we need to the table for the executives to be to get educated on. What made you look at this as a way to educate and give knowledge of events around what the executives may or may not need?
So again, it really started with just personal experience and diving into being a nonprofit leader and spending a significant amount of time drowning in the deep end and really wishing that someone would throw me a life vest and really sort of saying, more than just mentorship, where can I go when I don't know what I'm doing? Sure, you can Google, but to spend hours in Google, when you're a nonprofit leader, you're so busy. You're busy just fulfilling your mission and working with your volunteers and meeting the needs of your board and supporting your staff. And you're so busy being proactive, you really don't often have the time to be reactive. And I realized that I really valued the opportunity to be reactive on behalf of nonprofit leaders and to be able to be that sort of external force that provides them with the opportunity to say, hey, you focus on what you need to do and let me focus on trying to help you and trying to bring the things to you that you otherwise would be spinning your wheels and spending your non-existent spare time trying to hunt down. So how can I bridge that gap between what you don't even know that you need to know or how you need to be supported and the ways that I know that you do need to be supported based not only on my on my personal and professional experience, but also just always meeting with nonprofits, always speaking with nonprofit leaders, getting that feedback on if you could press pause on time and you had 24 hours to do whatever the heck you wanted to do within your organization without an email catching you up or an emergency, what would you do? And really trying to be one step ahead and be thoughtful about that.
So I noticed it because, well, I'm there, but I want you to describe the range of nonprofits that you have as members. You have top tier all the way down to starting a nonprofit yesterday, but give us some insight on that.
You got it. So we run the gamut, and that was really by design, because I think that when you think about the
that was always my
space,
question: was it by design?
That's right. When you think about the nonprofit space, there seems to be a gap, ironically similar to, I guess, society as a whole, right?
Sure.
You've got the big guys, you've got the small guys, and you've got the invisible guys. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions on what it means to be a big guy, a small guy, or an invisible guy. And so how can we sort of level the playing field? How can we create a space where if you've got that title, and we could spend a whole nother podcast on the title and the perceptions of titles, but just for membership purposes, if you've got that title of ED and CEO, I don't care if you started your nonprofit a month ago and you have 0 staff and you don't even know how to do a budget and you've never written a grant before, or you're a $50 million organization with a staff of hundreds. We really seek to level that playing field and really create an opportunity and really create an organizational culture where no matter your size, no matter what you do, you know that the Nonprofit Executive Alliance is here for you.
Yeah. I really like that about the organization, that we have so many people who are a wide variety, from people who have staff of hundreds down to people who have staff of 2. Case in point, right here. But I think it's really, really important that they always engage together, and that's what I really love about the organization. Everybody has an equal voice, and is that by design as well?
Absolutely. In fact, when the Nonprofit Executive Alliance first rebranded, membership was only available to the CEO of a health and human service organization. And one of my first requests as the new ED was to change that and to really allow membership to be available to any CEO or ED of a nonprofit, even if you weren't health and human services, because again, whether it's cultural or it's environment or anything else, you still have a role to play in the health and human service continuum. And at the end of the day, no matter what your mission is, there are still issues that are going to resonate with you from the human side, from the fundraising side, from the infrastructure side. So not only are we looking at a diverse group of budgets, but we're also looking at a diverse group of missions. We're also looking at different ways that CEOs and EDs deliver their services and how they run their organizations. And again, it was sort of meant to be the only qualifier. We're exclusive but inclusive all at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're exclusive, meaning you've got to be the CEO or ED of a nonprofit. And we really wanted to make sure that we kept that. That way we knew that it was leaders speaking to leaders. But we're inclusive in that that's the only qualifier. Above and beyond that, whoever you are and whatever you do. You know, we've got some members who they don't have any staff, and it's just a side hustle, passion project that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some really great experiences. We've actually had an organization that started off as a volunteer organization that, through the support of the Nonprofit Executive Alliance, is now a paid staff. And they are well on their way to building their organization.
So this is key, is that it's not just an organization of a group of leaders just sitting around talking. They're actually passing on information amongst each other, about each other, and partnering. I think partnering and collaboration is so crucial to what we do every day. And I'm glad you say that. I'm glad that you were able to influence them changing the mission to from not just having health and human services, because as far as I'm concerned, everything is health and human services. That's why I prefer the name social impact organization and not nonprofits. I know the nonprofit is a government name for us, but I prefer social impact organizations.
Agreed.
But it has a lot to do with it. All of us have, no matter whether, because we have an organization, we have art, we have parenting, we have foster children, we have a wide variety of folks that belong to the organization. All of these leaders, and I emphasize the word leaders, all of these leaders bringing something to the table, bringing education and bringing their experiences more than anything else. Because what Sandra really talked about was talking how she went through, having to be jumping in the pool in the deep end and learning how to swim while she was in the water. And we get a lot of organizations like that, correct?
Absolutely. Again, when we talk about who we are and what we do, we really emphasize we're there to support nonprofit leaders both personally and professionally. And so the professional space is, being that resource hub, and all of our members knowing that they don't have to know everything. If there's something that they don't know, they can shoot me an email. If I don't know it, I will hunt it down on their behalf. But my job for the most part is to know it even just a little, enough to be dangerous, right? But also personally. I think it's really important for nonprofit leaders to know that they're not alone. For them to know that they're not alone, both in just the heaviness of the work that we do, but also in some of the challenges. There's a lot of similarities between for-profit and nonprofit, but there are also some really unique aspects of the nonprofit industry and the nonprofit space as a whole. And so while you might be able to participate with colleagues in the for-profit space, I think having the opportunity to create this space for just nonprofit leaders is really valuable. And even some of the organizations that I think at first, sort of rolled their eyes and thought, oh, I can't make the meetings once a month, and what's this? This is just another group. I always tell people, listen, you don't want to be a part of it, that's fine, but I can guarantee you're going to come across a colleague in the next 6 to 12 months. This organization is going to come up in conversation, and they're going to look at you like you're nuts because you're not a part of it. And
Exactly.
again, that doesn't even speak really necessarily to me. It really speaks to the organization that our members have chosen to create together. We speak a different language, so it's good to know that you've got people that speak the same language as you, that understand what it means to rest your head every night and have the weight of the world on you, and to have to wake up and do it all over again, no matter what the front page of the paper has to say.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's imperative that we as leaders definitely understand that we got to help and mentor those other leaders, especially those ones who are coming up, and especially along the terms of fundraising and board membership and accounting and all those things that are key. So I know you have several committees, different committees as part of the organization. So give us a little insight.
So yeah, obviously the goal of our organization is to support the nonprofit leader, but we recognize that part of supporting that nonprofit leader is also supporting their key staff and their key stakeholders. And I say that whether or not, if you're a small organization, that key staff might be you, right? You might be the ED and the CFO and the HR director and the development director.
Know the feeling intimately.
And that's okay. So one of the first things that we launched several years ago was our affinity groups. And our affinity groups we've got for CFOs, chief operating officers, program officers, development directors, HR directors, and facilities directors. And again, the thought behind that was CEOs typically are the ones that get out and do networking and meet with other people. But how can we really hone in on those leaders within the organization that typically don't get out of the office very much and probably have perhaps lonelier jobs in that they don't know who else is in their space.
Sure.
I will tell you some of my favorite affinity group meetings are the ones where they're speaking their own language that I don't speak. I don't speak nonprofit CFO fluently. But the conversation moves so smoothly in these groups because it's the first time perhaps, and I've had some folks saying, I've been a nonprofit for 30 years and I've never had a space like this where you can just look at your colleagues. You know, I always start, we do most of our affinity group meetings on Zoom because, hey, post-COVID. And I can't tell you how often I get feedback saying, you know, this was the first time in years where I felt like I can speak to people that understand what it means. Because even within a nonprofit C-suite, the CFO might be speaking a different language than the program director, which is a different language than the CEO, right? Because everyone has their own distinct roles. So I always begin the conversations by saying these calls are not recorded. We really want to create that safe space. We really want to create not only the camaraderie, but allow those relationships to be built organically, but transparently and also confidentially. And what we find is when we strengthen those C-suite leaders, we strengthen the organization as a whole. And then in turn, we reduce the stress level of the CEO. And what more can we have than reducing the stress level of the nonprofit CEO?
I definitely love the sound of that. So as you have built these groups and let these folks who are going through the same things talk about what they're going through, and I love the point that you made about not being recorded. Everybody gets to speak freely. Everybody gets to consult their feelings. Since one of the groups that I'm a part of, it's a small budget, big impact organization group, and in that group we talk about things that we are small organizations as far as budget is concerned, but we have a large impact in the communities that we serve. Right. And I think it's so cool to be able to talk to those people who are feeling the same stuff that I'm feeling and going through the same pains that I'm feeling, and being able to expound on that without being encumbered, without worried about, okay, I got to worry about who's going to hear this or who's going to listen to this, and give me some ideas. I think that's for me, that's key, is that I love listening anytime we have a meeting, is because it gives you ideas and everybody has a take on it, whether they're a large organization or a small organization, right?
Yep. And I think that small budget, big impact group is probably one of our more, I hate to overuse the word, but one of our most impactful groups. And I think, just like you said, you know, when you have a small budget, you don't necessarily have the resources at your disposal to do some of the things that you want to do. You know, you don't have a big staff. You perhaps can't run the fancy operations that you perceive a larger organization to have. And there's really a unique set of opportunities and challenges that small nonprofits experience. Again, that was my background. So that was really one of the driving forces is I know what that's like. I've been there. And how can we use that as an opportunity to take organizations that are even smaller, right? Because Dade and Broward County, we're full of really small organizations that are doing some powerful work.
Yes.
And so how do we make our organization less intimidating to where you could feel like, hey, I can play with the big boys because at this organization, no one is looking at me. No one's judging me based on my budget size. You know, when you look at our membership list, which is a membership list that we share with elected officials, it's a membership list that we share with the business community. You know, it's a membership list that gets sent out pretty frequently. There's no budget size on there. So whether you're the biggest guy on that list or the smallest guy on the list, you are still on that list of members. And it's got the name of the organization and it's got, your name as the senior leader of that organization. And so again, when we're looking at trying to balance, level the playing field, and when we're having some of these conversations about how to create a space for smaller, impactful nonprofits, being a member of the organization, this is one of the ways that you can. Similar to that, when you're searching for an organization on our website, you're not searching by budget size, you're searching by name.
Sure.
So, I frequently encourage all of our members to make sure that they've got their profile filled out, because when a potential funder is going on to our website, they're not going to be able to search, $5 million budget or above, or, well-known organizations. They're going to be able to scroll it and say, who's serving children, or who's serving in a specific geographic location, or who's providing a specific service. And so we're really trying to think about how we can provide equal opportunity for big nonprofits, national nonprofits that have great branding, that have name recognition, and provide those same opportunities for smaller organizations that perhaps have never been able to benefit from having a household name.
So you mentioned something, and I want to expound on it a little bit. Your connection, or the connection of the organization with government, in particular county government in Broward County. How is that fostered? How have you fostered that relationship, and bringing not only knowledge, but bringing announcements, different things that the government wants to do to the Nonprofit Executive Alliance of Broward?
Great question. So again, the Nonprofit Executive Alliance is really meant to be a resource. And so in being a resource, it's what can we provide that you might not otherwise get. And in my time at Rebuilding Together, I like to tell people I learned nothing about home repair in my 7 years there. So what did I learn 7 years at Rebuilding Together? I learned a lot about generational poverty. I learned a lot about systems of care, dysfunctioning systems of care. I learned a lot about the need for nonprofits to advocate for themselves and for the sector. And I learned a lot about just sort of the business of nonprofits. And in that space, advocacy is a big one. Advocacy is a big one, both when it comes to policy and both when it comes to funds. We can't expect all nonprofit leaders to take time out of their day to watch or attend commission meetings, but I can certainly do that for you, right? I can certainly listen to what our county commissioners are saying, sometimes our city commissioners.
Especially when they concern our particular mission or the area in which we serve.
That's correct. You got it. And that's where the organization can be a resource, right? Because you never know what someone might say. When you look at a county commission agenda, it could be a 20-page agenda. There could be 70 items on there. And of those 70 items, maybe 60 of them or 55 of them are approved on consent. But these meetings sometimes last 3, 4, 5 hours. Yeah. And you never know. They could be talking about housing or homelessness or mental and behavioral health, public safety, education. You'd be hard pressed to find any type of government meeting where they're not going to touch on something where that community challenge, the solution is not being provided by a nonprofit. And so it creates a great opportunity to say, oh, hey, Commissioner A was talking about something that you might be passionate about. Sure. And so how can I then create that link and introduce you to that county commissioner and say, hey, you know what, County Commissioner, I heard you mention something about community reinvestment and about banks. And it's true, because if you'll listen to commission meetings, and when it's time for Broward County to enter a new banking relationship, you've got commissioners that ask questions. Sure. They want to know who are they contributing to. Yeah. And so if they have questions, how can I be that resource? How can I create that bridge? Whether I'm introducing a nonprofit leader to a commissioner, or I'm just following up with them and I'm having a follow-up conversation with them. I'm saying, you know what? I heard you in the last meeting, you were talking about homelessness. It seems to be an issue that's really important to you. Yeah. Talk to me about some of the leaders that you see in that space, and how can we use that as a teachable moment? So it's not just making the introductions, but it's also having that knowledge base and being able to provide that knowledge and share that knowledge with someone that is in a position of power. If you don't have the time to do that, because again, you're busy running your organization, that might be a space that we can support.
That is so crucial, I think, because we find it difficult to be in all places at all times and government has a lot to do with what we do.
Right.
And trying to understand, okay, what did this particular resolution, what is this particular policy or law that's going into effect? How does it affect us? How does it affect the people who we serve? More importantly, and how is it going to affect our mission going forward? And it's good. I'm glad to know that you're there, doing those, viewing what's going on and being able to report back to us. Sandra does a great job in getting information out as far as the newsletter is concerned, and our monthly meetings are concerned, giving us information, inviting government officials. I've never been a part of any organization that has more, especially a local organization, that has more public officials that show up to a meeting for an organization than Sandra. I don't know what power she has over them, but she gets them every single time.
Well, again, because I'm sort of in that neutral space, it's sort of a running joke amongst some people, but when I start a conversation, I'm not here to make an ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to ask you for any money. I'm not here to ask you to be a board member. And so when you can disarm, whether it's a business leader or an elected official, by saying, I don't have an ask, I'm just here to have a conversation.
Sure.
It lends itself to a very different conversation. One of the pieces of advice that I love to share with nonprofit leaders is, if you ask for advice, you get money. If you ask for money, you get advice. I'm taking the asking for money out of the equation altogether, and that's how you foster an authentic relationship. When the person on the other side of that conversation knows that you're not in it there's no end game for you other than just relationship building, having conversations and improving the community, you can have a very different conversation than when in the back of their minds they're thinking, what do they want from me? And let's face it, if you're a nonprofit leader, anyone you talk to, there's
always an ask in the back of your mind.
They're thinking in the back of their mind.
There's always an ask in the back. Yeah, there's always an ask.
The other side of the piece with local government is they do provide funds. I mean,
sure.
They do fund several of our nonprofit organizations. So it's also, how can I be an advocate for those nonprofits that are receiving funds? And then in addition to that, how can we also think outside of the box about what we can do to engage smaller nonprofits to be able to apply for some of those grants.
Sure.
So right now we're working with Broward County and some other local funders to roll out a stronger technical assistance program where we can support smaller nonprofits that perhaps do the work that grant opportunities are available from the county, but perhaps don't either have the infrastructure or, quite frankly, the confidence to be able to apply for those grants.
That's hugely important, I think, that because there's a lot of great work being done by the smaller social impact organizations, a lot of great work, but they don't feel they have the experience, or I shouldn't say experience. I can't say experience. They don't have the experience with government, and they don't have the experience with submitting to government for those dollars, and so they may have to partner with larger organizations, and that's another thing that you do very, very well, is partnering and collaborating these different organizations together so they can possibly go after those big dollar grants that helps not only the smaller organization, but also the large organization as well.
Partnership is definitely where it's at. I'm a huge proponent of partnerships, both because I think that it creates better outcomes for whomever it is that we're serving. But I think it also creates an opportunity for organizations to really allow themselves to be better by recognizing what they're good at, what they're not good at, and bringing in a partner that does something that perhaps they're not good at. Yeah. Again, going back to some of these affinity group meetings, if you're a nonprofit leader, I'm here to tell you that your CFO hates it when you take on a new grant just because you think it's a good idea.
This is true.
And sometimes we do, right? I feel like sometimes as nonprofit organizations, we're willing to sort of wade into mission creep because we see an opportunity.
Sure.
And 9 times out of 10, it's going to not work out well in your favor. And when you are part of a coalition of over 115 nonprofit organizations, there is an opportunity to reach out to another organization that does something similar. It certainly takes the leader putting their ego aside,
sure,
and recognizing that this is what's best for everyone. But I will say that I have, in my time at the Nonprofit Executive Alliance, I've seen many organic, and I really want to stress organic partnerships, which is very different than when a funder or a board member or a donor says, you and you need to work together on this. So when we have organic partnerships and we've got organizations that are willing to bring their strength to the table and allow someone else to provide something that they don't do so well, magic happens. And there's few emails I love more than the emails that say, hey, organization A and organization B got together, and as a result, look at the magic that happened. And I think that for a lot of our organizations, that's where there's bang for the buck when it comes to membership, especially, again, like you mentioned, for those smaller organizations. You know, we've got some organizations that are really small that are subcontractors for large organizations. They're a sub-grantee.
Sure.
You know, they worked with a larger organization that was able to apply for the grant, that was able to fund the program until it got reimbursed, because not all grants, not all grant funds,
the dollars don't show up immediately.
Not all grants come on the front end. But, you know, I also like to remind nonprofits, regardless of what their size is, applying for the grant is the easiest part. So if you're struggling to apply for the grant, I can assure you, you're going to struggle even more in executing the grant, reporting the grant, and managing the grant.
Yeah, those are the things that people miss about grants, is that submitting that grant is the easy part.
That's the easy part.
Living up to the grant is the hard part.
That's correct.
And doing the reporting. So we have something exciting that's going to happen here shortly, and I'm not going to announce it. I'm going to let Sandra announce what's going to happen as far as the new expansion, so to speak.
Yes. So I am so thrilled that we are expanding. So the Nonprofit Executive Alliance of Broward, and we've been a Broward-based organization since our inception. You know, again, really in the vein of recognizing regionalism within our sector, both in delivering services, in where clients are coming from and where employees are coming from. You know, the issues that we see in Broward are not county specific. And so, Cornell, as you know, it wasn't an easy decision, but we are really excited to be growing into Miami-Dade County. And I think that our growth into Miami-Dade County both shows the success of the organization thus far, and I think for me is what was most important for me, and sort of the big selling point for me was recognizing the regionalism of our sector, right? Was recognizing that in order for us to elevate the conversations that we're having in our silos as an industry, we need to come together. Because when you've got nonprofit leaders that cover the two largest counties in the state, we're going to be unstoppable. And what does unstoppable mean? Unstoppable means being able to elevate all of our conversations that we're having individually. Being unstoppable means strong-arming our way into tables where decisions are being made, where typically nonprofits are not always
right up my alley.
To.
Thank you very much.
And being unstoppable also means just better supporting the community as a whole, and really sort of admitting and acknowledging that the issues in Miami and the issues in Broward, quite frankly, are the same issues. And when we look at Tallahassee and when we look at Washington, D.C., there really is very little delineation between the challenges in the two counties. And so how can we take the brain power that we've created in Broward, harness that brain power that we know already exists in Miami, and really just create a force to be reckoned with. You know, I credit you, Cornell, for really championing this idea of moving away from calling ourselves nonprofits and really moving into the space where we're calling ourselves social impact organizations. And you're right. No matter what the conversation, whatever economic development conversation is happening, whether it's economic development or, quite frankly, even if it's a culture war conversation, whatever conversation is happening on a local level, a state level, or a national level, those solutions are being provided by nonprofits. They're being provided by social impact organizations. And so often we've gotten into this cycle of people thinking that we're charities looking for a handout, and how can we leverage,
and they don't see the work though.
How can we leverage this work to reframe the conversation?
Sure.
And these are not charities looking for a handout. These are not organizations that, oh yeah, they're doing good work. These are the solution providers to all of our community challenges.
Exactly.
And how do we reframe the conversation to where it's not just about the respect that I think that our sector deserves, but I think it's more of an enlightenment opportunity where collectively the powers that be, the people that sit in positions of power and influence, can really understand that the purpose of our sector is to not only improve communities and not only to improve outcomes, but to make our world, to make our community, to make Dade and Broward County a better place to work, live, and play.
So I know that you're partnering with a large organization. What organization is that you're going to be partnering with to move into Miami-Dade County?
We are really excited to be working with Philanthropy Miami. Philanthropy Miami is a fantastic organization located right here in Miami-Dade County. They have been in Miami-Dade County for, I believe they just recently celebrated their 20th anniversary. And as they were looking to expand, right around the time that the Nonprofit Executive Alliance of Broward was starting to do their due diligence on should we, shouldn't we, and I certainly want to note that it was a due diligence process that took over a year, exhausting and turning over every stone to make sure that this was the right thing, not only for us, but really the right thing for our members. Because it's not about us growing the name and just getting new members for the sake of getting new members. At the end of the day, our organization is only as good as the benefits that go back to the membership. And really seeing the tidal wave of support from our members in saying, listen, we're already working in Miami-Dade County. We want to work in Miami-Dade County. Our clients are coming from Dade and Broward. Our employees are coming from Dade and Broward. And so it really came down to who is going to be that right partner. And I am confident that Philanthropy Miami is that right partner. We were thrilled to be able to announce that partnership and that expansion at their Ignite event earlier this year. And we are really looking forward to our official launch event to be determined coming October 2023 to a centrally located location near everyone.
Well, I think it's important that, and I'm glad I was able to be a part of this. And Sandra did 120% of the work, and nailing down what was going to happen with Philanthropy Miami. Not only that, but the responsibilities of each organization, and putting forth the idea and how we were going to incorporate folks from Miami-Dade and Broward County in order to work together in order to achieve the mission, which is to impact society, and in a good way. I mean, we have a lot of issues that we need to solve, and us working together, building those collaborations, building those partnerships, not only with our members, but with supporters, sponsors, and other foundations that are around, that are in the area. Getting everybody together so we can work together to come up with some ideas. I love being in a group, and I love being in Sandra's meetings, because I can listen to things and somebody will say something to make something click. And once they make that click, then we can work together in order to solve a problem. So I'm really, really glad that the organization is going to be moving into Miami-Dade County. They have some great executives and CFOs and executive directors here in Miami-Dade County that want to be a part of this as well. I've talked to quite a few of them. They really want to be a part. They're looking forward to it. I think Sandra's bringing to Miami-Dade County an association that needs to exist just like it exists for Broward County. I mean, in Broward County, you have how many members in Broward County now?
We have 115
and
CEO
growing
members and growing in Broward County. And, you know, it's interesting. And Cornell, you and I talked about this because you know that at first I was a little hesitant. You know, Miami is, while there's so many similarities, nonetheless, I think that we can all agree that Broward and Miami are very different markets.
Especially in how they do things.
That's correct. That's correct. In a lot of different ways. And so I think that we're going into this recognizing some of the nuances, respecting those nuances, you know, respecting that culturally Miami-Dade County looks very different than Broward County. You know, so we're going into this with the right intentions, with open eyes, with open hearts, and really with the intent and the purpose of we've seen this model work in Broward, and we believe that this model can work in Miami as well, based on the things that you and I have spent some time talking about, you know, really focusing on that nonprofit leader, being able to support them personally and professionally.
Well, and it's my firm belief, though, Sandra, that if anybody can bridge that gap between both culturally, as well as racially, let's be real, as well as racially, and the divides that we have, anybody can do it. I think you can, and I think you're leading the organization through a very glamorous time that's about to come. I look forward to the organization being successful. I look forward to the support of the nonprofit executives in Miami-Dade County as well. This can be I like to think of that practically everything that we do is a game changer. And sometimes that word is overused, but I don't believe that it can be overused in this particular instance, simply based on the fact that as social impact organizations impacting society, trying to change things for the better is so important. And all of us working together, even building collaborations and partnerships whom we don't know, who may on paper may not. Why is blue with orange, for that matter? You know what I'm saying? But being able to cross that boundary and being able to see the different ideas that could come about, I think is key, right?
Agreed. And you hit the nail on the head. You know, I think that there are partnerships that everyone thinks, oh yeah, well that's a given. But if it's those partnerships where you bring together organizations where at first you're like, wait, what? But again, going back to when we first opened it up to art and culture organizations, it was, you know, art and culture organizations. Okay, well, let's think about, you know, some of the organizations that now, as a result of opening it up to art and culture organizations, have a music therapy program or have an art therapy program. And so again, I think that thinking outside of the box, and it's funny you said, you know, overuse words. I feel like in the nonprofit space, that's all we do. We use the same buzzwords at nauseum. You know, it's the same 10 words that we use.
But I think a lot of that has to do with the funders and the public at large, because that's what they attach to.
Right.
But we have to be a part of changing the narrative.
And so one of the things that I'm most excited about in terms of how we can be a game-changing organization is when it comes to risk. And you know, nonprofits typically are pretty hesitant to take risk because in the nonprofit world, you're not really rewarded for risk, right? Because who wants to get a grant to do something innovative, buzzword, but overused buzzword of the day, who wants to get a grant to do something innovative, fail at it because you tried something new, and then have to tail between your legs go back to that funder and say, hey, thanks for the money, but. And so as someone who's done that before, nonprofit CEOs that are watching or listening right now, I think
we've already been there, done that.
I was the one that received a grant from an organization to do something innovative, to think outside of the box and take a risk. And it failed miserably. And halfway through, I thought, okay, I can either continue to go forward just so that I can check the box, send my final report, try and fluff it up as much as I want and never speak to that funder again. Or I can have a really honest conversation with the funder and say, hey, listen, what we tried to do didn't work. I'd like your permission to be able to pivot and focus on this because we believe that this is going to work.
That is so important what you just said about organizations learning how to pivot. What may have been a great idea in 2022 might have some conditions that changed it as far as 2023. I think we really saw that with the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And I'm a firm believer of being able, our old military term we used to have called lift and shift, being able to lift and shift and be able to and report back to that funder.
Yes.
Okay, look, this didn't work, and here's the reason why it didn't work. But I have a new plan. I do have a new plan because we've learned some things from failure.
Yes.
Aren't you not supposed to learn things from failure? And that's one thing I think that the Nonprofit Executive Alliance is really going to be able to help with organizations and us learning. Okay, Cornell, you might not want to try that. I tried that as an organization, and we could not get it to work, and here's why. Right? How can we do that? How can we change that? Right?
And hearing those lessons, I think is again one of those benefits of membership. Is we've had different, whatever we've called them. We've called them a learning series. We've called them ad hoc groups, but we've really tried again to create that space. And I feel like creating a space is the overused word of the day.
Sure.
But that's what we're all about, right? We're all about creating spaces, and we have had those opportunities where we did allow nonprofit leaders to share their biggest failures and to own it for two reasons. One, so that every other nonprofit leader that heard that conversation, whether they're going to admit it or not, can at least feel like, oh, wow, if it happened to her, it's okay that it happened to me. But also to normalize it. Not that we want to create a system where everyone is just failing left and right. We certainly don't want that. But it is okay to pivot. It is okay to acknowledge that you tried something new. It didn't work out the way that you wanted it to work out. And so being able to have these conversations is one of the ingredients in the secret sauce of the Nonprofit Executive Alliance is knowing that you can be your authentic self, whether you're bragging about something or you're not. One of my favorite meetings of the year, we do it every December. We allow everyone to share what they were most proud of during the year. And in our meeting last December, I remember when the first person, what they were most proud of happened to be a complete and utter disaster. And so they said, instead of sharing my biggest success of the year, I'm going to share my biggest failure of the year, because we're all sort of bragging about all the great stuff
that's
that we
so
did.
different.
And there are a couple people that you could see were kind of rolling their eyes and thinking, oh, well, it must be nice to have had such a great year. And the second the first person was able to be vulnerable and share their biggest failure, it then provided the opportunity for other nonprofit leaders to either share their biggest failure of the year, or at least to say, hey, you know what? We did this that was really great, but hey, I really appreciate that you shared your biggest failure, because I fell on some things this year that weren't so great. I didn't really know how to handle it. Can I sidebar with you?
Yeah.
And so for one of those occasions, I know the person that shared their first failure, she called me later on that day and she said, I guess I wasn't alone. She had received several emails from people saying, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being honest, and thank you for being authentic. And I think that the ability to be honest and authentic is one of the great things about being a part of the Executive Alliance, is not only being able to share your biggest successes, but to be able to recognize that failing in our industry is okay.
And not being afraid of it. Not being afraid
and
of it.
Failing in our industry could then lead to other great
Sure.
things, right? Whether that failure is a program that went awry, whether the failure was having a board member who went so far off the rails you didn't know what to do, whether that failure was falling significantly short of your fundraising and having to lay people off, whatever it was. And quite frankly, because right now one of the biggest issues that's facing our sector is the challenge in the workplace and being able to recruit and retain employees.
Sure.
Some of the biggest failures last year was just falling short on doing what you do because you didn't have enough people.
Yeah, didn't have the bodies.
And so I know that we're having a lot of conversations as it relates to the workforce crisis as a whole. And so what I like to tell people is, while it might be an inconvenience to have to wait longer at a restaurant or to have to bag your own groceries at Publix, for our industry, it's really unique. And for our industry to have that workforce crisis, if you don't have enough people holding up the safety net, people fall through the safety net. And that's the really big risk.
Agreed.
And so now our workforce crisis and sharing some of the vulnerabilities as it relates to the workforce crisis now creates a whole nother set of, well, what do you do? What do you do when you're falling short of meeting your mission because you don't have enough worker bees to be able to do what it is that you need to do. And those are the conversations that we continue to have at the Nonprofit Executive Alliance that perhaps maybe you are already having as a nonprofit leader amongst your colleagues, but having that on a more macro level and being able to bring attention to that on a macro level and working together to provide those solutions, I think is another ingredient in our secret sauce.
Yeah, I think that's key, because that's been, in every meeting that we've had, that's been one of the main issues is I can't hire the people, or the people are not out there to hire, and maybe it's because they don't. I think a lot has to do with, at least in my opinion, is that a lot of, in particular, young folks, younger generations don't know about what the work they can do as social impact organizations. Yeah, they know about volunteering to clean up the beach, and pick up trash on the beach, but do they know about helping a family that's going through trying to get their documents to be in this country, or working with children, or working with arts and culture? Do they know about those items that are available, or those opportunities that are available to them? And I think the one thing about the Nonprofit Executive Alliance is that bringing those opportunities out and discussing how, more importantly, discussing how we can get our opportunities for those job opportunities out to the general public is a conversation that we have to continue to have. So I look forward to continue that conversation. I know that's not going to stop.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point in mentioning millennials, Gen X in the house. 100% Gen X. You look at Gen X and you look at all the stereotypes of Gen X, and I am hitting every single Gen X stereotype known to mankind. And so that leadership gap is another thing that we've already looked at that we really hope to lean in on with our expansion. You know, we've got a lot of baby boomers and older Gen Xers that have been doing this a long time, that get the game, that know the game, that help create the rules of the game. And then you've sort of got this leadership gap. I'm going to try and say what it is that I want to say without disparaging anyone that's younger than me. But I think for the most part, what we're finding is a very different set of expectations for the younger crowd as it relates to what they want out of their career, which I think provides both opportunity and challenges for our career, right? Because I think that what we're finding with young people is a desire to do good and a desire to be involved that perhaps we didn't see with older generations. But I think that we're also seeing a disconnect with the time and sweat equity that it takes to be able to make a difference.
Oh,
was that diplomatic enough?
You're so
Cornell?
diplomatic. I can't.
'Cause,
you're so diplomatic right now.
And again, I don't want to stereotype all millennials. I don't want to start getting hate mail from anyone under the age of 40. But there's definitely a disconnect. There's definitely an expectation. There's an expectation that as it relates to salary, there's an expectation as it relates to work-life balance, you know, that
workload.
That hustle culture that certainly I grew up with as, you know, as the daughter of immigrant parents, you know, that hustle culture looks very different.
Sure.
And it's something to certainly be admired, right? You know, props to anyone that says, no, I'm willing to work X number of hours a day, X number of hours a week, and then I'm done. Yeah. You know, to some extent, I admire that. But I think also what we find is when you look at some of the qualities of impactful leaders, when you look at some of the qualities of transformational leaders, those qualities, those soft skills really do tie into the hustle, the passion, the drive to do good, but also that commitment. And unfortunately, that commitment does sometimes mean, you know, working overtime. You know, I'm infamous for sitting down with people that want to create a nonprofit, and please don't create a new nonprofit. Please reach out to me, and I am more than happy to connect you to a nonprofit that already does what you do, that can mentor you, that can work with you, that can provide you with a leadership opportunity. But when we're really thinking about those transformational leaders, I like to tell people that want to get into nonprofit leadership, if every night for the next 30 days, you can rest your head knowing that the weight of the entire agency is on you, making payroll is on you, delivering programs and services is on you, keeping your board happy is on you. You know, when you're a nonprofit leader, the buck stops with you.
All
and
day.
we can't sugarcoat the pressure of what that means.
Yeah.
And some people are built for it and some people are not.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we're willing to sort of sugarcoat what it means to be in nonprofit leadership. Like, oh, how good it feels to give back. And yeah, it feels good to make a difference.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you really have to accept the weight and the responsibility of the mission on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And I
It's
think
difficult.
that as can't believe I'm identifying as an older leader, but
Welcome to the club.
Right. But I think that as we're thinking about, you know, some of us that can no longer identify as young professionals, I think that it really is incumbent on us to be honest about that.
Sure.
And to not sugarcoat the fact that
This is tough.
having the title of CEO or ED is going to be super cool and super fun, and you're going to hold that business card in your hand, and you might have a lot of pride in seeing that title, but that title carries a lot.
Yeah.
And I really hope that the Nonprofit Executive Alliance can do a better job and really lean in on fostering those leadership qualities of the next generation, of really creating a pipeline of those leaders that are able to accept the balance between the responsibility and the benefit of being a nonprofit leader, because that's one of the places where we do look different than the for-profit space. You know, on the other hand, my husband and I, we are entrepreneurs. We own laundromats. We own a juice bar. We know how many widgets, we know how many smoothies we need to sell to make our month. We know how many loads of laundry we need to do to make our month. In the nonprofit space, that looks very different. And I think that we need to do a better job of culture, of fostering a culture of leadership development.
I look forward to working with you on that. You know, leadership is one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and I prefer leaders to be passionate about what they do. I think for me, all those things you said are very, 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 very important. But for me, the most important thing is passion, and having a passion for the work. That helps drive all those other items. If you have a passion for people, you have a passion for society, you have a passion for impacting society, I think that totally helps. So I look forward to working with Sandra, and we've been working together for quite a few years now. I look forward to working with her on this. So I have one final question.
Great.
That I didn't warn you about.
All right.
So my question is this, and I ask all my guests the same question. If I gave you all the power in the world and you could change something, what would it be and why?
If I had all the power in the world, what would I change? I think I'm going to have to put my parenting hat on, and I would change the way that we expose children to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I will tell you, you know, for me as a parent, I've really worked to try and raise my children the way that I was raised in the 90s, in the good old days, right? Not to say that the 90s was a perfect place then, but when I look at the vulnerabilities that are associated with being a parent and being a kid today, I think above and beyond all the work that I do in the nonprofits, the exposure that children get to adult topics at younger and younger and younger ages.
So easy these days.
I think is really, when you look at some of the challenges that we have as a society, I think that if we were really willing to admit to ourselves how we might be able to pinpoint it, I think a lot of that is going to come back to how we've exposed our children to sex, drugs, and rock and roll at an early age.
It's going to be interesting to see how children develop, especially from 2010 on, and how they are now, growing up now, and how, especially not exclusively, but from 2010 on, because that includes the pandemic. how they are in their 30s, especially the 20s. Everybody runs crazy, I think, in their 20s.
Sure, listen, I mean,
But
I
the
think
30s,
every generation thinks, I mean, I remember when I was listening to the music that darn well what I listened to. My parents, a generation before me, look at that and think, oh my gosh, and they were clutching their pearls too. But I think that the internet and specifically social media has really created something that has taken away childhood from children.
It's hard being a kid these days.
And taking away childhood from children, to me, is something that in history we've really never had to deal with before. And so if I had all the power in the world, I would probably make it to where someone under the age of 18 could not go on YouTube or have social media at all, and could not be privy to anything that would not allow them to just be a kid and play in the dirt and do the things that I was forced to do when I was a kid.
It's a hard job being a kid these days. So I want to thank Sandra Veszi Einhorn for visiting the Just Economy podcast. So before we go, please give us contact information, website, and so on.
Absolutely. So our website is www.npobroward.org. I could be reached at sandra@npobroward.org. You can also Google me and find me relatively quickly because, again, my job is to be out there. So if you are a nonprofit leader in Broward and or Miami-Dade County and you're not yet a member of the Nonprofit Executive Alliance, we welcome you to join us, and we know that you won't regret it.
I can assure you that you won't regret it. So again, another Just Economy podcast in the can. It'll be posting soon. We want to thank Sandra Veszi Einhorn, the Executive Director, Nonprofit Executive Alliance of Broward, soon to be of South Florida. Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida is the sponsor of this podcast, and we greatly thank you for your participation. We look forward to having more guests. This is something that we will continue to do. I think bringing issues from the community to the community is important, and talking to those folks like Sandra, who are very, very big, a very, very important and big part of helping solve those issues, is key to building a just economy in Florida. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the Just Economy podcast. I'm your host, Cornell Cruz Jr. See you again soon. Thank you.